Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I am sitting in front of my movie corner. I have my Army of God t-shirt on, my Son of God movie right next to me, and judging by the frame around me, we are back, taking down Inspiring Philosophy's top 10 biblical problems for Young Earth Creationism. In the last episode, he was talking about a book that was called The Lost World of Genesis 1 by John H. Walton. And when I said that it was most likely the fact that that he was reading into the interpretation of what he wanted to read into the interpretation, I found that if you buy the book, he has a bunch of different propositions, where Walton kind of breaks down each usage of different words, meaning different things in Genesis chapter 1. And he starts out in this particular thing. It said, the previous chapter presented evidence that creation accounts in the ancient world characteristically showed interest in the functional level rather than the material level. Moving down to the next page, it says, create is the English word for bringing something into existence. If existence is defined in material terms, creating is a material activity, i.e., in the last Bible verse, when he says, for instance, Ezekiel 21:19, and make a signpost, make it at the head of the way into the city. That make is the same word as create in Genesis 1. So it's saying create a signpost, right? Okay, we all understand that. In a material sense, right? You get some wood, you hack it up, okay? You nail the wood in there, and then you say, okay, here's a signpost. Okay? Then it says if existence is defined as a functional terms, creating is a function-giving activity. We cannot assume that creating is a material activity just because our ontology happens to be material. We must let the word and its usage speak for itself. It is interesting that many people who discuss Genesis 1 expressed an interest in interpreting the chapter literally. By this, they generally mean that it is to be taken exactly for what it says rather than understand Genesis 1 simply as metaphoric, allegorical, or symbolic terms. Of course, we recognize that sometimes writers intend to communicate by means of metaphor or allegory. When someone insists that Genesis 1 should be interpreted literally, it is often an expression of their conviction that the interpreter, rather than the author, has initiated another level of meaning. Our interpretive commitment is to read the text at what I will call face value. I will have more to say about this in Proposition 11. For the moment, let us consider the concept and challenge of a literal interpretation. The English reader must face a difficult fact. One cannot comprehend the literal meaning of a word in the Old Testament without knowing Hebrew or having access to the analysis by someone who does. It does us no good to know what create literally means. We have to know what bara literally means. For before that leads to frustration or despair, we can recognize how even those without knowledge of Hebrew can check the data on the Hebrew analysis at some level. A quick review of words and how they work will help us see how this all is. Okay. So, he first then goes on to state that there is no, Hebrew dictionary. Like we have the Oxford English Dictionary, right? So if we want to look at a word, meaning of a word, we just look it up, right? We don't have that. What we have is we have a series of texts written in Hebrew, and we have to try to interpret what those texts mean in the context of which they were written. Okay? And that's how we discover language. That's how we discover different things. Okay? So it says, instead we rely on the careful work, this is him speaking, instead we rely on the careful work done by commentators and translators over the centuries. How do these scholars figure out the meaning of words? The same way all of us do in whatever language we speak, by usage. Okay, the meanings of words are established and determined by the ways in which they are used. This includes the kinds of sentences they are used in, The words they can be compared to, synonyms or antonyms, and words they are used in connection with. For nouns, this means what verbs they take. For verbs, it includes what subjects or objects are associated with them. It is context that tells us whether a word is used metaphorically or with idiomatic or technical sense. Consequently, a scholar who says that Hebrew word means this or that should offer evidence from usage to support his or her findings. Having been provided a list of references in such an analysis, even someone who does not know Hebrew can double-check the data. So, for instance, when I say that all the occurrences of bara have God as the subject, or implied subject, an English reader can look at all the occurrences and see that this is so. Now the analysis can begin. What is said about the Hebrew verb bara? First, there is no passage in the Old Testament that offers explanatory gloss for bara. That is, it says, by bara I mean X. So as usual, we must depend on circumstantial contextual analysis. Subjects, objects, and related terms. Okay? The verb bara occurs about 50 times in the Old Testament. As referred to above, deity is always either the subject or the implied subject in passive constructions of the verb. It can therefore be confidently asserted that the activity is inherently a divine activity, and not one that humans can perform or participate in. And then as objects, it says, it is of interest that few commentators discuss the objects of the verb, but this is the most important issue for our analysis. Since we are exploring what constitutes creative activity, specifically material or function, then the nature of that which has been created is of utmost significance. If the objects of the verb are consistently material, that would be important information. Likewise, if they are consistently functional. Of course, the profile is unlikely to be so straightforward. Ambiguous contexts are bound to exist, so a bit of methodology must be discussed. And then basically he goes into kind of a methodology of it, and he says, Table 1 provides a comprehensive list of the objects of bara, see page 42. The grammatical objects of the verb can be summarized in the following categories. The cosmos, 10 times, including new cosmos. People in general, 10 times, and specific groups of people, 6 times. Okay? And basically, and then it has specific individuals or types of individuals, 5 times. Creatures, twice. Phenomena, e.g. darkness, 10 times. Components of cosmic geography, 3 times. And condition 1, a pure heart. Which is what he was talking about. Okay? So, in all of the uses of bara, interestingly enough, Inspiring Philosophy picks the one time that something is not being created, specifically out of material means. Psalm 51, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Right? Now, that is the ultimate cherry pick in this context, because anything else off of the list in this book is all either the cosmos being created, signs being created, that kind of stuff. And yes, there is one instance where
Ezekiel 21, it refers to making a sign. It is even used to refer to David not eating food.
And that's only like 1 or 2 instances where bara is used as a consumption verb, okay? Where they're asking him to eat, okay? Because this was after he committed the sin with Bathsheba, the sin of adultery with Bathsheba, okay? And Nathan comes to him and says, you've done bad, and you must repent, but God's going to take the child from you, okay? David fasted and prayed and wept for the child for 7 days. Okay? And they were like, hey, you need to come and you need to eat. Well, and then it's like as soon as the child dies, he gets up, he goes in, washes himself, goes out, sits down, and starts eating. And the people are like, what are you doing? And he's like, why should I fast and pray now? Child's dead, dude. I thought that by me fasting and praying and making supplication for the child, that God would spare the child. Apparently that wasn't God's plan. So what am I supposed to do now? The child's dead. Okay? But this is the only instance of them using bara in that context of come and sit and eat with us. And that's it. That's the only instance of it happening, is in this passage. So the problem then comes in with this idea that, and it's what I alluded to in the last part, where I was talking about how I was in a debate with a guy who was saying, "Oh, I have all these. I'll bet you think that the gospel writers were the gospel writers." And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Oh, ha ha ha! You're so funny because I have all these PhDs backing me up. Har har har! Joke's on you." And I'm like, no, that's not exactly what it's saying. Okay? Now, in that book, he breaks down a lot of the individual words that people kind of look at things. And he says a little bit later on in the chapter, in the proposition, that he goes, look, I'm not saying that it is or isn't allegorical in terms of creation. He goes, because I'm a Christian just like you. We're just looking at what these words are and what they mean. Because we're a very materialistic culture, okay? We thrive on having physical things that we can use to hold on to, okay? And when we look around us and we see things that are physical, like this bookcase, like these DVDs, like the Word of God, okay? We see these physical things and we think it can't have all just appeared out of nowhere without some kind of agency. Okay? And this is the problem with atheism and with evolutionism, is because evolution says it all came out of nothing, spontaneously generated itself into something billions of years ago through the Big Bang. It can't happen. We live in an entropic universe. It is fundamentally, physically impossible for that to happen. And before you start saying, quantum physics says, how do you know? Do you understand quantum physics to the point where you can point at something and say, yes, that is what quantum physics absolutely shows? Or are you seeing something? As I proposed two things. The last time I talked about quantum physics, I proposed two things, okay, as possible explanations for what's going on. Either A, we're seeing manifestations of God popping in and out of our universe in line with Colossians 1:16 and 17. Okay, in Him all things hold together. Okay, just like with laminin, just like with the Whirlpool Galaxy, just like with other things that we see around us, we see evidences of the Creator. And is that what we're seeing? Are we seeing God popping things in and out of the universe because He's outside of our universe and He can influence the universe in that way? Maybe, maybe not. Or are we seeing things that are outside of our scope that seem to materialize in front of us when we don't see it? Think of it this way, okay? Have you seen those videos of cats where a person will come up behind the cat and like drop a cucumber, right? And then the cat will all of a sudden turn around and then get scared and like jump away because it's like wow, what the hell? Where the hell did that come from? Okay. The cat, in its mind, does not know, A, what the hell is that, and B, where did that fucking come from? Okay? So, but, what did the human do? The human went and got a cucumber out of the refrigerator, went and dropped it behind the cat without the cat knowing, because the cat was distracted. And so, what I'm saying is that when we're looking through a microscope, okay, at the quantum level, and we see things kind of popping in from seemingly nowhere, is it popping in from seemingly nowhere? Or is it outside of our purview, ergo we don't know that it's there, and then it pops in, and we're going, whoa, where did that come from? It just spontaneously came from nowhere. Or is it coming from somewhere? Those are two plausible explanations that are the reason for those things happening, okay? And again, I'm not the world's foremost expert on that stuff, but I'm trying to say that we don't know, okay? You could talk to quantum physicists, and they'll tell you they don't know, because they're just starting to understand some of what makes the quantum realm. And you can't tell me, I'm sorry, you can't tell me that that's the only way that things happen. Okay? It has to be this way or it has to be that way. There is no way that you could possibly do that. Okay? And it's not like Marvel, okay, where we can just shrink all the way down to the quantum level and be able to walk around and know exactly what's going on. Okay? We can't. I remember that there was a cartoon, I think it was from the 60s. It was a Fantastic Four cartoon. And in one of the episodes, the Fantastic Four shrank themselves down because they looked at atoms and they saw the electrons orbiting the protons and neutrons of the nucleus. And he goes, it looks just like planetary orbits. And he's like, so what are we going to do about it? And he's like, well, let's shrink ourselves down. So they shrank themselves down, and they went down and they found that the electrons were like these little tiny planets that were orbiting the protons, which were like these big things. And there were people that lived on these planets, and there was battles that happened, and they had to go through and do all this stuff. And I'm going, electrons are energy. They're literally balls of energy. They have no substance. So they couldn't have people living on them. You see what I'm saying? Like, they just couldn't have people living on them. There's nothing there to live on. So, I mean, it's like you have to be careful when you start to look at, oh, well, see, Marvel's doing it. They know what they're talking about. No, that's just fiction, okay? And what we know is what we can see. And that's it. Okay? So we can speculate all we want, but we won't know until we die and go to heaven and find out from God exactly what happened. Okay? So, let's continue on.
There are times it could refer to material creation out of nothing, but it never necessarily does.
Well, no. Again, you have to take it within the context of the passage. Again, I said that in the last episode. Okay? And see, this is something that IP seems to be incapable of understanding. Is that context is everything. Okay? Because when you start to look at how things work, okay, you start to understand that this chart that he's got on the screen right now, okay, is the same chart that's in the book, yes, and he's saying that a lot of these words are in reference to creation itself, or creation of people, as in either, like, you know, like in Genesis 5, or like Genesis 1:27, or Genesis 2, when it refers to actual material creation of people, okay? And, like, it's one of those things where, again, certain parts of it don't actually, you know, show some of the different things.
Examples where Bara cannot refer to material creation.
Like what? Are you talking about Psalm 51:10, where it says, "Create in me a clean heart"? Because most everything else is definitely talking about material creation, either as a nation, as a people, okay? As a nation, as in we create like a nation of people, okay? like Isaiah 41:20, rivers flowing in desert to meet the needs of his people. Because again, he's talking about the object. Because you have to look at the subject. It's God. What is he creating? So it's God creates blank. What is the object of the creation? That's what this chart is talking about. And in only like 1 or 2 instances, okay, is it talking about something other than what IP thinks it is? Okay? Because even if it's referring to make a signpost, that's still creation, IP. You're creating the signpost, aren't you? Now maybe God isn't the one doing the creating, because he says you create a signpost. But it's literally the same thing. Because how do you have to create a signpost? Think about it. You have to get, a thing. You have to write on it. You have to tack it up. You have to do all that stuff. How do you have to create a signpost, dude? Come on. Think about it, man. It's common sense, okay? And again, some of these may not be referring to actual physical creation out of nothing, but it's still referring to the act of creation. And 9 times out of 10, God is the subject, and then things are the object, including pure heart in Psalm 51:10, because it says, create in me a clean heart, O God. So David is asking God to cleanse his heart, to create a new spiritual heart within David. That's it. And you'd have to be the most biblically illiterate person on the planet not to understand that. Because this is the difference between exegesis and eisegesis. And the funniest thing is that Daily Dose of Wisdom's channel just had IP on. Well, they were doing a video, and I don't know that I have the title of the video, but and IP was on there talking about some biblical stuff, and I'm sitting there going, it's so funny to me how IP can sometimes be spot frickin' on with certain things, and yet be so far off on stuff like this. It is so bad. It's like, dude, how can you be so spot on in one video and yet be so far off in another video because you're eisegeting your own worldview into that subject so freaking hard that you can't even see what you're doing, man? And I feel sorry for you, IP. I really do. I wish you would just become a Christian and start actually believing in the Bible. Because I think you would make a wonderful apologeticist. Because you have a lot of philosophical ideas and you have a lot of really good things that would help further the apologetics. But then you come out with videos like this that make people facepalm so freaking hard. Because you don't understand what's going on. Context matters, dude. So while, yes, not every single instance of bara equals creation from nothing, it's still the act of creation. That's the point, dude. Think about it.
So there is no reason to assume that that is the meaning in Genesis 1, especially given the previous problems that we have gone over.
Nope. Because as we said, this passage is not talking about that. This passage in Jeremiah 4 is talking about a battlefield, not creation. Again, context matters. You absolute idiot. I hate to have to say that, but come on, man. Read in context. One of the biggest things that blows my mind about flat earthers, whether they want to call themselves Christians or not, and atheists, is when they run to flippin' prophetic books to try to justify their worldview. Yeah, let's use a vision about that. That would be like me showing you a picture of a World War I battlefield. That's what Jeremiah 4 is. You absolutely just incomprehensible idiot. Okay? Because it's not that he's talking about the fact that they're he's talking about a vision, man. I mean, it's like the passage literally says, I looked on the earth, and behold, it was out formless and void, and to the heavens they had no light. I looked to the mountains, and behold, they were quaking, and all the hills moved to and fro. I looked, and behold, there was no man, and all the birds of the air had fled. I looked, and behold, the fruitful land was a desert, and all the cities were laid ruins before the Lord, before his fierce anger. It's literally saying that the Lord is using an army to come and do scorched earth on the Israelites because of their sins under the kings of the divided kingdom. Go read Second Kings, man. Like literally, go read 2 Kings, okay? And when you get to the end of 2 Kings, what does God do? He literally tells them, about 3 or 4 chapters before the end of 2 Kings, he says, I've had it up to here. I've been patient, I've been kind, but you pushed me too damn far. We're done. You're gone. Out. Finito. And I'm going to send a mighty army to come and destroy you. And for 70 years, you will not live in this land. And after 70 years, I will restore you. And that's exactly what he did in the Babylonian exile. And that's what Jeremiah is talking about in this passage, is that when the Babylonians come in, they're going to go scorched earth. And they are going to destroy the land of Israel for the Lord. That's his fierce anger. If you'd bother to read the passage, IP. This is the problem with eisegesis versus exegesis. This right here, this whole slide is eisegeting. Oh, see over here in Jeremiah, see, it's almost like backwards from what the creation account was. And so, like, it can't possibly be, Genesis 1 can't possibly be the same thing, because they're all the same words and they're being used in the similar context. No, they're not! Because over in Jeremiah, they're not talking about. He's talking about looking at the earth in darkness. Okay? Because he's seeing this in a vision. So this is the beginning of the vision. He looks on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, because it's not formless and void. Let me go grab the passage here really quick. Because it's not formless and void, it's without form and void. Because I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, and to the heavens they had no light. I looked on the mountains, and behold, they were quaking, and all the hills moved to and fro. I looked, and behold, there was no man, and all the birds of the air had fled. I looked, and behold, the fruitful land was a desert, and all its cities were laid in ruins, before the Lord, before his fierce anger. Thus says the Lord, the whole land shall be a desolation. Yes, I will not make a full end. For this the earth shall mourn, and the heavens above be dark. For I have spoken, I have purposed, I have not relented, nor will I turn back. At the noise of horseman and archer, every city takes to flight. They enter the thickets, they climb among rocks. All the cities are forsaken, and no man dwells in them. And you, O desolate one, what do you mean that you dress in scarlet, that you adorn yourself with ornaments of gold, that you enlarge your eyes with paint? In vain you beautify yourself. Your lovers despise you, they seek your life. For I heard a cry as of a woman in labor, anguish as of one giving birth to her first child, the cry of the daughter of Zion, gasping for breath, stretching out her hands. Woe is me, I am fainting before murderers. It is literally the Lord talking about the destruction of Israel from Babylon. That's literally what he's talking about here. Okay? And you'd know that if you read the damn passage, IP. And this is the problem with exegesis versus eisegesis. Because this is eisegesis. As we've discussed at length.
Mathews notes bara more likely refers to bringing about activity, rather than material manufacturing.
In what? Because it says God created the heavens and the earth. Is that not a new activity? Him creating the heavens and the earth? He's creating the heavens and the earth. I mean, he can create a new thing at the same time he's doing a new activity. But generally speaking, yes, if you look at the list in the other book, in the Walton book, you'll understand that yes, most of the time it is referring to a new activity. Not necessarily a new thing. Like creating a nation. Okay? Or creating a peoples out of a nation. Or creating something, or, doing something like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not creating new things too. Because in your example of pure heart or clean heart, isn't that asking for a new heart? See, and he's only talking here about Genesis 1 through 11:26. Okay? And you'll notice here that it says an exegetical and theological exposition of Holy Scripture. So where is he saying this? On pages 128 and 129. Is that in reference to Genesis 1? Or is that in reference to bara being used later on in Genesis itself? Because it's not just used in Genesis 1 only. It's used throughout all of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. It's used throughout the Old Testament. So is pages 128 and 129 of the New American Commentary there, okay, referring to that in Genesis 1? Or is it referring to something else? And you're taking his meaning of bara in that context and using it to say, oh no, this is about Genesis 1. Do I need to look it up? I think I might need to look it up. Because it seems to me like this guy doesn't really know. Okay? Now, let me see here. Let me grab. Come on. Alright, let me see here. The New American Commentary, NIV. And let me see if I can look at it. Nope, that's not it. Okay. Okay. I'm trying to find it. So let me see here. 128, 129. Oh, unfortunately, I don't have. Dang it. Unfortunately, I can't. Nope. It's not gonna let me read it. Shoot. Back really fast. Let me see here. This one had kind of a thing of it here. Or was it the other one? Oh wait, no, it was the other one. So I'm just looking for this. I'm just trying to find, let me see here. So I think actually this one had it. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so I can tell right now. That pages 128 and 129 are not talking about creation. At least not in the typical sense. Alright, hang on. Let me see here. Okay, so here's where he's getting this from. Page 128. Created, bara, is used in the Old Testament consistently in reference to a new activity. It forms a sound play with previous in the beginning, where the three initial letters are the same. It occurs in the creation account 6 times. 1, 1, 21, 27 times 3, 2, 3, and also 2, 4a. The etymology of the term is disputed and is of little help, but its frequent appearance in the Old Testament enables us to define its meaning with some security. The striking feature of the word is that its subject is always God. It therefore conveys the idea of a special activity accomplished only by a deity that results in newness or renewing. Also, bara always refers to the product created and does not refer to the material of which it is made. For these reasons, commentators have traditionally interpreted the verb as a technical term for creation ex nihilo, creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. In doing so, it is often contrasted with the verb asa, meaning to make or do, which may have its subject human activity, as well as divine. In particular, asa is used where making involves existing material. As the argument goes, asa can refer to human activity in which pre-existing material is transformed, but bara is used exclusively of God's activity with no presence of pre-existing material. Create, however, does not necessarily mean altogether a new thing. For example, Psalm 51 reads, "Create in me a whole clean heart." This line parallels renew with within me an upright spirit, indicating here that create has the nuance of restoration. David was asking for a transformation, not a new entity. Isaiah 57:19 speaks of God creating praise on the lips of the mourners. Context of the passage involves restoration of his wayward people, in which he will heal and restore, or repay in the New Revised Standard. The sense of bara in the context of Isaiah 57 indicates that God will renew again the lips of Israel's mourners where there was once praise. More importantly, the context of the creation account itself, create and make, are used interchangeably for the creation of human life. Verses 26 and 27, see also 2:7 and 5:1, which is, basically what Walton said. In the heading of the following Toledot section 2:4, created and made occur in matching temporal clauses. The term asa in 2:3 is used to elucidate the meaning of bara, which God created by doing. By itself, asa also occurs in 1:7, 16, and 25, where it indicates God uniquely accomplished his creative task. If bara were a technical term among the Hebrews for creatio ex nihilo, in distinction from a human endeavor, we would expect it to dominate the creation narrative. However, it is used sparingly in the account and is reserved for highlighting significant aspects of the creation where the blessing of procreation is bestowed on the first animate life, 1:21 and 22, and supreme animate life, 1:27 and 28. If the doctrine of creatio ex nihilo is expounded here, it must be from the tenor of the text and not from this single lexical term. Elsewhere in the narrative is it apparent that God created ex nihilo, e.g. 1:3. While we disagree that create is a technical term for fiat creation, it is clear that bara, with God exclusively as its subject, indicates special significance for God as autonomous creator. The term maintains our focus on the thematic subject of God, who alone can accomplish creation. The declaration of verse 1 without any intimation of competing pre-existing matter is so distinctive from its ancient counterparts that we must infer that all things have their ultimate origin in God as creator. Created is found most often in Isaiah, 20 times in chapters 40 through 66, where the prophet distinguishes Israel's God as creator and true Lord of history. In the context of Babylon's religious practices of astrology and idolatry, e.g. Isaiah 40:26, Isaiah celebrated Yahweh as creator who acts in history, creating Israel for himself, examples 42:5, 43:1, 7, and 15, and accomplishing a new thing by delivering his people, 43:15 through 19, and 48:6 through 8. God then begins history at creation, but continues to create history through his sovereign lordship among the nations. Since God is creator of all that exists, he is antecedent to it, distinct from it, while yet intimately involved with it. According to ancient Near Eastern lore, gods abounded in heaven, and deities were forces of land and sea. The ancient myths did not adequately distinguish between the creator and the creature, but Israel declares that the universe is no more than a creature. In Israel's view, there was no divine heaven or earth. It was this view that freed the heavens and the earth from superstition and provided an ideological basis for the emergence of modern science. Expressions the heavens and the earth indicates the totality of the universe. See Excursus translating 1 and 2 on pages 136. So there you go. So again, he's more agreeing with me in terms of it's the context. In Genesis chapter 1, some things might be, some terms might be used like, God saying to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field and the creeping things, go, be fruitful and multiply, which is bara. But he's also using bara when he says, in the beginning God created bara, the heavens and the earth. So what was there, if bara means exclusively that there had to have been something there. So again, it comes down to the context. And again, Kenneth Mathews is not, and see, this is the problem, is that he is focusing on this one single line on page 128, even though if you read the whole passage from 128 through 129, which we just did, he doesn't necessarily say it's only a new activity. Because he does say that there is the case for it being creatio ex nihilo, or creation out of nothing, because what was there in the beginning for God to use. Because God would have had to create something unless there was already something there and God was just using whatever was there to form the earth. Do you understand? So if there was nothing there for God to form, then God would have had to have created it, and that's what Genesis 1:1 is referring to. That's where we get the creation out of nothing. Okay? Is what was there. How did God make the plants sprout? How did God form the birds of the air and the beasts of the field? Did he create them the same way that he created man? Did he form them out of mud? How do we know? The account doesn't say. That's the point. Okay? So we're having to infer by context and how it's being used. Okay? And in Genesis chapter 1, it is exclusively about God creating something. And whether that something is from something else or whether that something is from nothing is up to the context. Does that make sense? Because again, this is the supreme example of cherry picking. Okay? Because this fits IP's narrative of, see, bara refers to God bringing about a new activity, not necessarily a new thing. See, backs me up. That's one line out of the whole entire thing. And if you read the whole passage, IP, you'll find that that's not what he actually says. He actually says what I'm saying, which is you have to look at the context and you have to look at what's going on. And yes, sometimes you see that it's talking about this and it's talking about that. So while certain instances of bara may not be necessarily referring to God saying, I'm creating something out of nothing, there are certain cases where it's very clear in context that there is nothing for God to create something out of. And lest we forget, evolution does this with the Big Bang. There was nothing, and then there was the Big Bang, and it just created something out of that nothing. So they're literally believing the same thing we are, and yet they scoff at us for it. And they won't even look at it. It is pathetic.
Implying Genesis 1 is not about material creation. Before we get to number 1, remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you are updated when new videos are coming out. We have several videos on archaeological evidence for the life of Abraham to the Exodus coming out over the next few months. So hit the bell and stay updated to know when these videos are published. And now finally, number 1, Genesis 1, verse 1. This may come as a shock to you, but the very first verse of the Bible can create difficulties for young Earth models. The reason is, over the past few decades, scholars have noted the first verse lacks a definite article in Hebrew, so the way we translate it may not be accurate. Instead, scholars like John Salhammer and Robert Homestead have argued it would make more sense to translate it as, when God began to create the heavens and the earth. What this would mean is verse 1 is no longer a complete sentence, but what we would call a dependent clause in an incomplete sentence.
So, let's look at begin. (80-40). Because whenever you're going to look at something, okay, what you have to do is you have to look, again, at the context, okay? And so what ends up happening is that when we look at the context, so beginning in this context, okay, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, okay, we look at 80-40, and it is Resit. What is first? Beginning. It's translated first 13 times, first fruits 8, beginning 7, best 6, early 3 with 928. First fruits 2 with 7262, beginnings, plural, once, choice parts once, early once, finest once, first fruits of harvest once, foremost once, leaders once, mainstay once, starting once, supreme once, and when once with 928. Okay? So, when they look at that, okay, it's not exactly, it's saying what is first, beginning. Okay? Now, one of the things that we could do is, let me run up to my Genesis 1:1. Okay. So, Strong's number 7225. So this is from Strong's. Okay, Reshith. That's that word above us, Reshith. Okay? It's a noun feminine, means beginning or chief, meaning the first, in place, time, order, or rank. It's beginning, chiefest, first fruits, part, time, principle, thing. From the same as Rosh, the first, in place, time, order and rank, specifically a first fruit, beginning. Okay? So, in most things, it's a noun feminine, meaning beginning or chief. Absolute is in Deuteronomy 33:21, in Genesis 10:10, in Deuteronomy 11:12, Ecclesiastes 7:8, and Job 42:12. 1a, beginning of a kingdom, as in Genesis 10:10, beginning of a year in Deuteronomy 11:12. When you get down a little bit, it says Genesis 1:1, in the beginning when God created. Absolute, in the beginning, God created. Okay? So this is the problem we face when you start to look at different things. The problem comes in when people seem to not understand that when you look at a word, okay, the word is beginning. So it's not necessarily when. Now, let me see here. Sailhammer. So he's not going to put down what it is. I'm looking at the things that he has down at the bottom here to see what is, so like down here at the bottom, he has a whole bunch of different things, and I can't seem to find a readable copy of the Genesis Unbound from 2011. I haven't looked at the Homestead, Robert E. But it seems to me that if both Strong's and my strongest concordance say that that word means beginning, not when, but beginning, okay? And you'll notice that, interestingly enough, the Hebrew, because it's an Eastern language, okay, it's written from, it's written from basically right to left, okay? So, for us, it's backwards from how we normally read, okay? And you'll notice that he had it correct on the screen up above. Then he's twisted it on the independent clause version. And you may not be able to see it because it might be behind my head, but basically he put in the beginning God created instead of in the beginning created God. Okay? Because that's how most Eastern languages work, is that it usually goes like their syntax is different than what ours is, okay? Ours is usually, okay, we have like in the beginning, and then we have subject, verb, object. They have in the beginning created God object. So they have verb, subject, object, okay? And you have to understand how those work. Does that make sense? So, like, you have to understand how everything flows. Does that make sense? So we can't just, like, look at something and then say, oh, but it means this. It's, if you have a bunch of PhDs that have done Bible translations, have worked on Hebrew for a long time, and have looked at things and say, this means beginning. And so we just add in the, then it means beginning God created, or beginning created God heavens and earth. Okay? So, I'd have to, like, read some of these books. I don't know if John Sailhammer is a Christian, if he's a Jew, if he's a Bible believer, if he's like Bart Ehrman. I don't know about Robert Homestead. I don't know about any of the other people, okay? So I'll have to look it up, and, you know, I'll, if I can find some stuff, I'll post some things in the link, I'll post some links down below, okay?
So this would mean verse 1 is dependent on the following clause, which is in verse 2. So Genesis is really saying, when God began to bara the heavens and the earth was formless and void. In other words, when God started baraing the heavens and the earth, it was already there as formless and void.
How do you know?
So many scholars note this implies Genesis 1 is not about bringing the universe and the earth into existence for the first time.
Not necessarily. Okay? Because no one necessarily knows that it was a dependent clause. Again, these are people reading their own interpretations into what they think that word means, okay, in the context. So that means that if there was a beginning at all, okay, then the earth was formless and empty. There was nothing there. Notice it says formless and empty. Okay? How would there be something there if it was formless and empty? Do you understand? There's no reason for it to be there if it says it was formless and empty? If that's the dependence for verse 1, then that means that there was nothing there. Which means you just debunked yourself. Which means Genesis 1 is about creation out of nothing. In that case. Because the earth was formless and empty. There was nothing there, dude. It's literally the word, formless and empty. Like, we've been over this, man.
But it's about God transforming the earth from a chaotic state into an ordered state.
No, it's not.
If the Hebraic form of verse 1 and 2 implies the earth was already there existing before the creation week, then the text supports an extended period of time prior to this and is not actually stating the absolute beginning point of our universe.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't imply any of that. This gap theory bullshit is just what it is. Bullshit. Okay? Because if God created everything, He wouldn't need billions of years to do it. Okay? So why would God have our universe explode from nothing, feed it with a whole bunch of stuff, wait for billions of years of linear time, and then all of a sudden start creating things? That makes no sense at all. Especially when they look through the James Webb Telescope and they see galaxies that are younger and smoother than they should be looking back through time. And they go, oh, oops. I mentioned that in my creaky blinder debunk. Okay? So, why is my question? And I'll bet you he's not going to answer this. But why would God do it this way? Why would God do it like this? This makes no sense at all.
Now I know some of these points might come as a shock to you, but we are not arguing this creates problems for the biblical worldview, just for young earth models that claim to be based on biblical texts. Given all of these points, the biblical scriptures don't seem to support many of the claims of young earth creationists.
In your opinion. Because most of the time when you were citing certain things, they were actually saying, yeah, we're not exactly sure, because we're working from, because we don't have like a dictionary that says like bara, here's what it means. Okay? So we're working backwards from this, and then we're working back from that. Okay? And the problem comes in from the fact that you're trying to eisegete into the text things that aren't there, man. And now you have people making wild claims about dependency on something that was without form and void. That was formless and empty. I mean, like literally, when you read Genesis 1 and 2, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And see, the problem is that most people, that when they read part B, is they say, well, it was hovering over the waters. So does that mean that there was mass there? Does that mean that there was something there? Or was the waters just a name for the Spirit of God hovering over an empty void? Okay? Again, we don't know, because we don't have all the different things. All we can do is look at that word, and when we see it used in other ways, we go, okay, that's what it means. Bam, and we put it in. Okay? So, in case people don't know, we don't have the original text written in Moses' hand. Okay? What we have are carefully copied texts handed down year over year over year. And we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were also translated from those same texts. How do we know that? Because when we translate the Dead Sea Scrolls from their language into from the language that they're written in into Hebrew and then into English, they match up perfectly. Okay? Which means that the people that copied that text had to have copied it from the original Hebrew. Okay? And we know from the Septuagint, okay, that they were copying the Septuagint from the original Greek manuscripts as well, around the same time that they were copying that the Dead Sea Scrolls were done. Okay, because the Septuagint, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Hebrew manuscripts that we have all agree. Okay, and that's what we're going off of. All of these biblical translations, okay, from the King James all the way down to your modern Bible translations, okay, are all basically they take the Hebrew text and they run the Hebrew text down, okay, and then they run that across. And what ends up happening is that if you grab yourself the Blue Letter Bible app, okay, let me let it load here for a second. Actually, let me look at. I think it's Bible Hub actually. Yeah. So another good resource is this one. It's called BibleHub.org, BibleHub.com. Okay. And what you can do is if you go to say NIV, right? Okay. And you'll see here where it says Genesis 1:1. Okay. Go up here, right below it, you'll see where it says PARSER visual com. You'll see where it says interlinear, INT. You click on that, there's the Hebrew, okay? And you will see that above every single one, okay, is the Strong's, and then how it's pronounced, okay? And when you click on the Hebrew word, okay, it brings up a concordance of where it appears in the Bible and how it's translated, okay, in different versions, okay? And then if you click on Strong's, there's the Strong's. This is all at your fingertips, folks. And you can also get this as an app on like Play Store, App Store, on Google Play, the App Store, whatever. Okay? And so if we look at the NAS Exhaustive Concordance, okay, which is the New American Standard Exhaustive Concordance, you can see that they're translating it the same way. Okay? Which means that in the literal word-for-word meaning of the text, okay, that word, Reshith, means beginning. So, in Hebrew, okay, because a lot of times, it's the reason why, if you go look at Wing Zero, okay, Wing Zero was a Genesis shoot-'em-up that came out back in the 90s, and it was one of the first games to use kind of a full voice acting kind of thing, where these guys in Japan created this like voice synthesizer chip that they put into the game. They were so proud of it, but they didn't have enough money because they were a small publishing company. They didn't have enough money to hire a translator. So they just thought, how hard can it be? And they just went down and they bought an English to Japanese dictionary, and they literally just like looked up the Japanese words, and then they looked at the English word, and then they wrote it down. Okay? And that's what they did. So if you go watch the introduction to Wing Zero, okay, or Zero Wing, I think it's actually called, you go look at the introduction to Zero Wing, you'll understand how Eastern languages are constructed. Honestly, you will. That's why I said all your base are belong to us, because we use a different sentence structure than they do. And word-for-word translations don't necessarily always mean exactly what we think they mean. And this is where these guys are coming in with this. They're going, oh, well, it's a feminine, so it's not a masculine, so it's not necessarily maybe beginning, maybe it just means when, kind of thing. But it says beginning. It means beginning, okay? Or first fruits, or chief, okay? Which is what it's translated as. Okay? Because when you look at it, it's translated in Genesis 1 as in the beginning. It's translated in Jeremiah 26, in the beginning. Jeremiah 27, in the beginning. Jeremiah 28, Jeremiah 29, at the beginning. Okay? So they're translating it beginning in those passages, because that's the context. Okay? And you can look at where it says, concordance entries, Strong's Hebrew 7225, 51 occurrences of this word in the Old Testament, okay, in different ways. And it actually shows you exactly how it's being translated, okay, exactly what words are being done. And that's why I was saying with, like it was translated this way with this extra thing, because it's either a preposition, okay? It's either a word stuck on, it's either a prefix or a suffix. Okay, so it's either stuck on before or it's stuck on after. Okay? And that's the whole point. Okay? Is that sometimes that changes the actual meaning of what the word is. And that's why it could be translated, all of that. Okay? Yeah, so Bereshith, okay, there it is. 5 occurrences. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning. Jeremiah 26, Jeremiah 27, Jeremiah 28, Jeremiah 29. That's literally the exact same passages that we just read. Okay, 5 occurrences. That's that word. Means in the beginning. Means the beginning. Okay, beginning of time. Okay, that's what it means. So no, we don't necessarily sit there and think, oh, this has a problem because of this, blah, blah, blah. Because again, you have to look at the actual thing. Okay? You have to look at the context of how the word is being used. And in this case, it's being used as a beginning point. Okay? Now let me look. Yeah, so like New Living Translation, in the beginning. Okay? I'll bet you my Jerusalem Bible does the same thing. Yep, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. New American Standard. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. See, that the problem comes in with people like this, okay, that want to reconcile science, geology, astronomy, all that stuff. They want to be able to say, well, see, we know that this isn't what. Now, in this particular Living Bible, okay, this is not the New Living Translation, this is the Living Bible. It's more of a paraphrase. It's more of a thought-for-thought translation, okay? And so Howard Linsell, okay, the guy who wrote this study Bible, okay, put, when God began creating the heavens and the earth was a shapeless, chaotic mass with the Spirit of God brooding over the dark vapors. Okay? Now, let me read. Monotheism, which is a belief in one God, has existed from time immemorial, even in the earliest religions. This view is the opposite of the modern notion that God evolved from a primitive animism to polytheism to henotheism to monotheism. The writings of Schmidt, Langdon, Petrie, and Zwemmer strongly support primitive monotheism. Polytheism and lower views of God point to retrogression, explaining the advent of sin and the spiritual decline which followed. In Romans 1:19-23, Paul summarizes the tragic devolution from monotheism. When God began creating, or in the beginning God created. So even he recognizes, because right at the end he puts, when God began creating, or in the beginning God created. So it can be either way, but it doesn't really matter because it still means the beginning. Does that make sense? And you'll find that like most translators, okay, and you'll notice that there was only like 3 people that were contesting this, okay, and those are people that have probably spent too much time sitting around thinking, in my opinion, because even if you take it like Howard Linsell does, even if you take 1-2, okay, because we could read the notes on 1-2, okay. Says the earth was, or the earth became, or over the darkness and waters, or even over the dark gaseous mass. There is no right way to translate these words. Oh, I'm sorry. What, were you lying? You see, when people do it, what they're doing is, okay, in 9 times out of 10, in most literal interpretations, and the most literal word-for-word interpretation you can get is the New American Standard. Okay? This is the New American Standard 95, I think. Yeah, this is the New American Standard 95. Okay? So this one was updated in 1995. Okay? And you'll find that there's different types of things. And basically what they did is they took a Hebrew and a Greek interlinear Bible, okay, translated it word for word, moved the words around to make it grammatically correct. There you go. Okay? So unless you're going to buy yourself an interlinear Bible, okay, that has like Hebrew and then a line of English, and a line of Hebrew and then a line of English, and then a line of Hebrew and a line of English, and then a line of Greek and a line of English, and then a line of Greek and a line of English, this right here is the most word-for-word translation that we have in the English language. Is the New American Standard. The second most literal we have is the King James. Okay? The third, well, I say the third, but like the one that's kind of right in the middle between word for word and thought for thought is the New International Version. This is a New International Version, for those of you that don't know. Okay? I bought this, I got this Thin Line Classic from Holman. Okay? So, yeah. Okay? No translation is 100% perfect. And that's why I'm saying the Living Bible, okay, this one that Howard Linsell did, this one is a more thought-for-thought translation. Okay? The most thought-for-thought, if you want the flowery prose without the word-for-word, is the Message Bible. Don't recommend it because it butchers a lot of the language to make its own interpretations of what Eugene Peterson thought that they were meaning. Okay? He uses a lot of flowery phrases and a lot of different things. Basically, a long-winded way of saying, okay, in Bible translations and in translating any language from one to another, there is always going to be imperfections because we live in an imperfect world. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the meaning behind the words has changed. Does that make sense? Again, exegesis versus eisegesis. And unfortunately, IP here has eisegeted a lot into this video. Okay? He's reading a lot into this. And that's bad, son. Okay? Extremely bad. Don't do that. Let's finish this.
Luckily on this channel, we have a 15-part video series which gives a more logical explanation of what the opening chapters of Genesis are claiming, with a focus on trying to understand these chapters within their ancient cultural context. So for more on Genesis, please see this playlist. But for now, as we have argued, it is clear a plain reading of Genesis does not necessarily support a 6,000-year-old Earth.
And you know that how? By eisegesis, not exegesis. Because how they're getting the 6,000 years, okay, literally, how they're getting the 6,000 years, okay, is they're literally adding up the dates, okay? Because we can go from here, and we know pretty much back to Abraham about how long that was, okay? And then we say, here's how we go, here's how far back we go, and then from here to here to here to here to here to here, and then the creation of Adam. Because Adam lived 930 years. Okay? And that's the point. Okay? And when you add it all up, it's approximately 1,000 years. Okay? And, you know, so that's kind of the point. Okay? That us Young Earth Creationists make, is when you add up the dates, it's approximately 6,000 years ago that the Earth was created. And the problem comes in when people like IP come out and start making wild claims with little to no basis on what those claims are, based on cherry picking and eisegesis. Okay? Because they're trying to read modern day interpretations into the actual texts. Okay? And we can't do that. We have to take it in the way that it was written. Now, I haven't looked at his playlist on Genesis, and honestly, I don't know what his salvation status is. I don't know what he thinks of God and Jesus. I know that, because I've seen him come out and defend Christianity, and then at other times I've seen him come out and bash Christianity. Okay? And I've seen him bash Young Earth Creationists like Ken Hovind. I've seen him bash Ken Ham. I've seen him bash other Christians. And at the same time, he'll go out and debate atheists like Aaron Ra and Professor Dave Explains, and he'll bash them too. So I don't know what his salvation status is. I would hope he's a Christian, but if he is a Christian, he really needs to start reading the Bible. And stop reading all of these other esoteric, stupid claims and taking things out of context to try to claim something. Because as we read today, the two passages that he put up there to try to justify his claims ended up being cherry-picked. Heavily cherry-picked. Okay? To say what he wanted that to say, not what they actually said. And it's bad when you do that. Okay? So smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, let me know what you thought of this series, because we are done now. And as we say, we will see you on the next one.